Welcome to Devlog 8 of Death Inc. In this video we're going to be creating office themed guns for our office themed roguelike. Now about a year ago I made a similar video in which I made these 5 guns, but since then the game has changed a lot and it's time to start making some new and improved guns, starting with the coffee gun. Now there are 3 ways I can see this gun functioning. 1. The coffee pistol. We create a gun that shoots a coffee cup like a bullet, nice and simple. 2. The coffee launcher, a sort of grenade launcher that shoots exploding coffee cups. Or 3. The coffee spewer, basically a flamethrower but with coffee. Looking at these 3 options, I immediately eliminated the coffee spewer. I can barely make a regular gun, let alone something that needs liquid physics. But when it came to 1 and 2, I couldn't really decide. So I went with a combination of the 2. The visual design of the coffee launcher, but the shooting mechanics of the coffee pistol. Now all I had to do was create a sprite of a flying coffee cup and make the gun function. And although it doesn't look too bad, there's clearly something wrong. I'm not talking about the fact that the bullets are going straight through the walls. That's not a bug. I know exactly why that is. It's because there are no walls. The player is literally walking over a flat PNG. But game immersion ruining secrets besides, the real problem is that the gun doesn't react to being shot at all. So I made a shooting animation to fix this, and honestly it made me really glad I added those tubes. Although I don't really know what they do, they make for some great secondary animation. Okay, so the gun is looking pretty good. Now we only need to add the final details. For example, a little bit of coffee shooting out of the gun after it's been shot. It's not a lot, but it does add to the gun feel. I also wanted to make a coffee splash animation for when the cup hits something, but after spending about 5 hours trying to make it look good, I eventually gave up. So I guess that's something for future me to deal with. For now we're going to move on to gun number 2, the printer gun. This is one of the guns that I made a year ago, and although I loved it back then, I now think there's a lot we can improve. For example, the original doesn't really look like a gun at all, it's just a printer. So for the new design I made sure to add a barrel to the end of the gun. I also switched the printer design from a big office printer to a smaller home printer. It makes less sense in the context of an office, but I do think that it looks a lot better. I also really prefer the shooting animation of the new design over the old one. It just feels more like a gun. Okay, so for me these are all logical improvements, but when it comes to the bullet, things get a little tricky. Because I love the old bullet design, there's just something so satisfying about it, but it always felt too light. I mean, it doesn't look like it can do any real damage. So for this new bullet I first wanted to make it a stack of paper, because that does more damage than a single piece of paper, but nothing really looked good. So eventually I ended up with something a lot more abstract, but with the pixel perfect camera we have, it looks just fine. There's not a lot going on, but there also doesn't need to be. Okay, so the final thing I had to do was add some little pieces of paper flying out of the gun when it's shot, and now it's finished. I personally think it looks a lot better than the previous design, and I'm very happy with how it turned out, which means it's time for gun number 3, the pencil gun. This is another gun we've already made before, and I gotta say I love the original design, and I definitely want to stick with a pencil sharpener as the gun. So here's the design I made. It's slightly bigger, and just like the printer, it now also has a barrel to make it look more like a gun. Now the shooting animation isn't amazing or anything, it's quite simply fine. However, when it comes to the bullet, things become a lot more interesting, because this time we're actually going to be downgrading something. You see, the original bullets were pencil rockets, which would follow the mouse position until they hit something and explode it. This works fine when playing with a mouse and keyboard, but as soon as you introduce something like a controller, it becomes a lot more difficult. And because I know people want to play games like these with a controller, I'm gonna have to keep that in mind, meaning no more mouse controlled rockets. Instead the gun is going to be shooting a regular old pencil, which at first was just going to be a slightly shortened version of the original, but in the game it just looked way too small, and the pixel perfect camera probably didn't help. So instead I went with a bulkier version, which not only do I think looks really good, it also feels like it would do more damage in the game. Also, if you're wondering what that little thing is that's flying out of the gun when it shoots, I think it's called pencil shavings, but I could be wrong. It's this stuff that I'm showing on screen right now. That's what it is, whatever that's called. But anyway, that's the pencil gun done as well, which brings us to gun number 4. So yeah, I had no idea what to do for the 4th gun. I tried looking through some of your designs in the Discord, and although there are a bunch of great designs, there wasn't really anything I felt I could do justice to. I mean, just look at this, it's amazing, but can I actually make it work in game? That's a whole other question. It's not that any of these ideas are bad, they're really not, but there's a huge gap between an idea and the actual implementation, and for now I just needed something simple but interesting. So I decided to try something weird. A chair gun. The idea had been in my head for a while now, but I could never really decide what was funnier, using a chair as a gun or using chairs as bullets, because both seemed hilarious, and realising that nothing was holding me back from just doing both, I got to work. And I will say, designing a chair gun isn't as easy as I thought it would be, and after about 2 hours of trying, I was left with 2 designs. One smaller, that looks more like a gun, and one bigger, that looks more like a chair. And because I couldn't really decide which one I liked more, I asked you guys. I made a community post showing both designs and asked you to comment 1 for the first design and 2 for the second. The response was overwhelmingly in favour of design 2, so I was left with no choice but to use that one. And with the design picked, I got to work on a shooting animation. I gotta admit, it looks a bit weird, almost like some sort of really weird squid, but if you take away the chair legs, it looks even worse, so it'll do fine for now. And with the shooting animation implemented, it was time for the chair bullets, and here's what I came up with: a really small chair. That's it, there's nothing else to it. Now, just that single sprite isn't gonna cut it, so I made an animation in which a chair bullet is turning, which I think turned out great. It makes a bullet look a whole lot more interesting, but even then, when I put it in the game, something felt off. At first I thought it was a lack of shadows, so I gave each bullet their own shadow, but it still felt too static and rigid. So just for fun, I wanted to see what it would look like if all the chairs were rotated randomly. Don't ask why, but I genuinely like the way it looks. For some reason, it just looks a lot more interesting, and I decided to keep it. Does it make sense? No, but does it need to? I mean, it's a chair that gets shot out of a bigger chair. I think sense has been thrown out of the window a long time ago. But anyway, that's the chair gun done. If you have any suggestions for future guns or any other thing you would like to see added to the game, feel free to leave a comment or join the Discord server. Also, if you don't want to miss the next devlog, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.